The New Triumvirate by Conway Fitzgerald. Chapter 12. Come. This way.
Dan pulled me gently by the hand, leading me down the darkened stone stairwell. Where are we going? Are we even allowed to be down here? I asked him in a near whisper.
Of course not,
he said with a mischievous smile. I was confused. He couldn't be leading me down to this place, into the crypt of the sacred fire, deep within the bowels of the All-Gods Church, just to rekindle his thieving career. Could he? What was he up to? I pulled out my thieving tools from my endless bag instinctively, unsure if I needed to pick the lock of the massive double doors at the bottom of the dark stairwell. Dan was strangely calm and maintained the childish grin I had grown to love.
You don't need those,
he said with a chuckle. His hands grasped both of mine at the bottom of the stairs. I then felt a powerful swell of emotion. Where had he been, I wondered? It had been so long since I had seen him. Since I was last with him, I thought. I missed his presence so intensely. This deep rush of emotion nearly brought me to tears. Dan then turned from me and pushed open the double doors to reveal the blistering light of the well-lit chamber beyond. I followed anxiously, expecting him to show me something valuable or something secretive that he knew only I could truly appreciate, but was not permitted to see. I could never have anticipated what happened next. We walked across the sacred hall and approached the large dais where the seats of the Triumvirate were constructed in stone. The 3 empty seats rested proudly before us. Dan paused before them and then looked back to me again, smiling. This was the hallowed nave of the order, a chamber meant only for those who belonged. But why was I here? Just then, the fire pit at the center of the nave burst alive with magical multicolored flames. Soon after, just like a warm sunrise creeping over the peaceful horizon, Fergus stepped out from a secret passage behind the 3 empty seats. Theos and Khan, Thon, and then Reg and Keontan had also entered the room with stoic solemnity. They all surrounded me, including Dan, forming a perfect circle around me where I stood before them, just outside of the reach of the magic flames.
Aermine, do you recognize the power of truth and the essential quality of justice?
Fergus asked. I do, I said.
Do you renounce the ways of evil and instead now choose to be a servant of justice, a steward of the law and keeper of the flame?
I couldn't believe it. They were inviting me into the Order of the Sacred Fire. They were making me an official member of their team. I was in disbelief. Dan looked to me a bit comically because that very important question Fergus had asked required an affirmation. He motioned his head back towards Fergus. Oh, yes, I do. I smiled, holding back my tears.
Then, as is my right, power, and duty as the sole member of these 3 hallowed seats, I make you a member of the Order of the Sacred Fire. You are now, and forevermore, a protectorate of the people, a bringer of justice, and a member of the White Flame.
The others then closed in around me with congratulatory hugs and the warmest of affection. They cheered that I was now one of them, one of their family. I finally had what I never had before. I was part of something larger than myself, something good and lasting. It felt incredible. I was overcome with emotion. I cried so much that my mouth became exceedingly dry. I was suddenly having a hard time swallowing, and then I could barely breathe. There was a dryness overcoming the entirety of my body. My beloved companions then disintegrated before my eyes. They lost their smiles, then their flesh, and then they became skeletons, and then fell to the ground in a lifeless pile of colorless dust. I tried to scream out to them, but I couldn't. I couldn't even breathe.
Aermine, you must awaken. You need fluids,
said Nuna. I was then awoken from my long slumber. I coughed out massive balls of phlegm that had plugged up my throat. My nose ran profusely as I gasped for air. My throat was on fire. I was dizzied and confused, unsure of where I was. Nuna gave me a cup to drink from. It was a healing tea filled with medicines and minerals, designed specifically to aid elvish women in their awakenings during this most difficult time of mating. The tea was painful to drink, but it helped me immensely. After I cleared my nose and throat, my head fog started to fade. I then realized my time with the White Flame, this time I had just spent with them, had all been a dream. I was in the Myr'Det Chenu, in the custody of Patherum Zett, sovereign of the High Elves. How long? I asked her, in a painful whisper.
It has been more than a week, Aermine. You must eat and drink right away. Your body demands it.
She then started stirring and spooning a nutty pudding into my mouth. It was a protein remedy for the drastic effects of the elvish egg spawn upon my body. The physical demands created by the forming of my elvish ovaries was incredibly intense. So much life force, so much energy and spirit were being drained from me by this tiny new prospective elvish creation forming inside me. That is why elvish procreation is so well timed and carefully nurtured among elvish culture. When the time for an elvish female comes, the proper treatment and protection is seen to right away. Despite this great discomfort, I was in ever greater want of sex. I felt completely comfortable in my nudity and had yet to peak in this want. It would be worse before it got better. Though the post-ovulation process, after failing to become impregnated, was even more difficult than the wanting. It nearly killed me at Kultabit, the last time I endured this awful part of elvish womanhood. I had a few more bites and sips of the tea as I came to. That's when I noticed I was being watched by a myriad of gray female eyes. They were all very young and pretty. Their faces were painted with eyes lined by mascara and other facial coverings designed to complement their natural beauty. They were all curious to see if the ugly, big-assed, red-headed punk they distrusted so intensely would be able to regain consciousness and survive. They certainly wished I would not.
She has awoken. Notify the head madam,
said one.
Why? Why is she even here?
Another whispered in the language of the Greys. She will just make a midgerin of our beloved sovereign. A midgerin was a nasty word for an elf that has sex with beasts, usually out of a lack of moral restraint or sheer desperation, as was the case with my father.
You were restless in your sleep. You were crying and calling out. I have never seen that happen before,
Nuna said, spooning more of the slop she had prepared into my mouth. I then reflected on the dream I had just before I was awakened. Fergus would often speak to me in my dreams. Was this a message from him? Had I now forsaken the Order? Was he reminding me of my duty to him and the Order I promised to serve? It was then I realized I did not have my endless bag of holding. In fact, I had none of my belongings at all. I was completely naked. I pulled the white silk bedsheet to cover myself. Where are my things? I asked her. I need to get out of here.
Nonsense, Aermine. You must rest and regain your strength. This process is far from over. It has just begun.
Nuna said calmly. I grunted at her and pushed the spoon away from my face. Where did they take my clothes? And my bag? I asked. I became anxious as I realized that the 3 envelopes given to me by Fergus, those that bear the name and message from the Great Seer, naming these 3 as the new Triumvirate, were in my endless bag. I stood up and then immediately fell face forward into the wooden floor. I was very dizzy and totally exhausted. The gathered gray concubines all laughed at me. Nuna rushed to me and helped me back up onto the bed.
Aermine, you must eat and regain your strength. You will need it.
Nuna assured me, offering me the spoon once again. A few hours later, after I was fed as much slop and tea as I could stomach, I fell back to sleep. I was awakened a bit later when the gray madam who ruled this harem of concubines approached my bedside. There was another servant with her who held some kind of long, curved wooden stick. I was so tired I couldn't offer any resistance as my legs were spread and the gray clinician inspected my vagina. Nuna also sat beside me at the head of the bed, gently stroking my scalp to calm me. The madam had a closer look at my genitalia, presumably to detect any venereal diseases.
She is clean. And she is ready.
The clinician confirmed.
Though she is clearly unworthy of the sovereign, she is not a grey. She is mostly human. Barely an elf at all. Please, madam.
It is not for me, or for you, to determine who and why the sovereign chooses his partners. He is still without an heir. He has taken a liking to this one. We will oblige him, the madam said with authority.
She is royalty. She is the daughter of the Woodland King. Though her birth was not as expected, she is a true miracle of creation, and thus a fine choice for the restorer of the elvish line of kings.
Nuna assured them.
She has never been wed.
The gray females could not hide their disagreement. Nuna persisted.
She is a fine choice for the continuation of our greater royal elvish line,
the woodland priestess asserted. The madam looked at her, but did not respond. She and the clinician then took their tools and left us there, amongst the rest of the waiting harem.
Nuna, what did you tell him?
I asked her in a near sleep. She smiled blithely, continuing to rub my scalp to calm me. But she did not answer me. Elsewhere, deep within their ancient laboratory, the gray mages inspected my coin pouch with great interest. How was it, they wondered, that I could hide from them so successfully the entry of 3 living humans within, despite the scrutiny of the sovereign's gatekeepers? They were completely vexed by this magic. It did not make sense to them. It was beyond their knowledge. Clearly, I possessed a magic TARDIS of great and theretofore unknown power. This type of keeping magic was known to them, though normally such magic could only capture items of non-living matter in such stasis. But I held within my coin pouch a much greater magic, one which could hold living matter in stasis, something they had yet to understand. This concerned them greatly. The Greys considered themselves the masters of magic on the known world. A human magic beyond their knowledge contested this thought and caused them great concern.
Why is it? Why can we not see that which is hidden on the other side?
One Grey Mage asked.
How do we know there is anything else still dwelling within? We cannot detect more life forms.
Another added.
I have an idea,
said the third Grey Mage.
Allow me to inspect the bag again,
he said. The other two great mages stood away from my pouch, laying there, empty as it appeared. The younger mage stepped closer to it, with a silver chalice in one hand. He looked at it again closely. The young Grey Mage then cast the silver chalice into my endless bag. It disappeared before their joined gray eyes.
We've done that,
said the High Mage.
We've seen how this little bag can gobble any item from sight. Its capacity appears endless, yet it reveals nothing within.
But the third mage then reopened the bag. He turned to them confidently.
I just held that chalice in my hand. It was the wine cup my father gave to me when I was pronounced an elf,
he said. He then reached into my bag and pulled out his chalice. The other mages were stunned. He had solved the riddle. One must know what went in order to pull it out. Meanwhile, I was returned wistfully to my deep state of slumber, only to be awoken again, rehydrated and renourished over a week later. This second time I came to, I was a bit more conscious, and I was finally able to return to my feet. Soon after, there was a frantic commotion as the harem was alerted to the arrival of the sovereign. They all gathered themselves and made themselves ready, hopeful for selection. I was busy sipping my fragrant tea and trying to stomach Nuna's elvish nut pudding. A gray dignitary then entered the expansive harem. He stomped his wooden staff, demanding the attention of all present.
It is His Excellency, the Sovereign.
The collection of gray concubines all rose to their feet and readied themselves for his arrival. Unlike them, I remained on my bed, though I did sit up at Nuna's request, curious to see how this ridiculous scene would transpire. Immediately upon his arrival, the prettiest and most likely chosen among them took center position, hopeful to be the first to garner his attention. The rest jockeyed for position, hoping to be the next to greet his gaze. Yet none of them, no matter their beauty, were the subject of his desired attention. He had been told that I was awakened, so he asked where I was. His aides and handlers then directed him over to the portion of the harem I had been assigned. The sovereign's handlers were appalled to see I was still laying there in my bed. Nuna attempted to placate this flagrant display of disrespect, choosing to explain it away because of my sickened state of womanly readiness for proper procreation.
She is here, Sovereign. She was only recently awakened from the long slumber of her time of meeting, as you can see.
She smiled and bowed. I did not. I simply stared into Zett's eyes.
So, my treasured guest from the Myr'Det has finally reawakened.
The Sovereign asked of me, smiling.
Are you able to walk? And perhaps share an important moment with me?
He asked. I rose from my bed, and despite the most dizzied haze I had ever felt, I was able to stand myself up before him, grasping my bedsheet closely around me to hide my naked body. After keeping my feet and catching my breath, I curtsied to him in a sarcastic way, accompanied with a snarky smile. I can stand, Sovereign, I said, though my voice had not yet fully recovered. I smiled at him again, and then flopped back down onto my bed. The madam and the harem's gathered concubines gasped at this apparent show of disrespect. The Sovereign smiled, just as he had before, with each of my other unexpected actions.
Aermine, daughter of Puale, child of the Ostropa. I would like for you and the lovely priestess Nuna to accompany me for a victory celebration in my hall. I think you will both be quite pleased to learn of this news I bring you.
The sovereign then reached out his hand to me. I did not take it. I looked over to Nuna with an angry sneer, and then turned to him and responded, "Look, great sovereign. I don't care if you've lived 100 years, 1,000 years, or even 1,000,000. You may be the all-knowing, all-powerful sovereign of the Greys. But understand this. If you want to share a bed with me, willingly, 3 things are going to have to happen here." His handlers and the closely gathered harem were shocked. Not only that I would speak this way to their excellency, but that I thrust 3 of my freckled copper fingers into the air before him. There I sat, naked and defenseless before him, yet confident and defiant, with my hand pointed upwards right to Zett's face. No one would dare do that and expect to survive such indignancy. Though I was building a reputation for such behavior among the Greys, I had done so since my days at Kul Tavet. Just as Theb Karu had done 2 centuries prior, the sovereign allowed me to state my demands. He smiled, lowered his hand, and gestured for me to continue. 1. You need to get all of these gray bitches out of here until I leave. All of them. The harem groaned and hissed at me with disapproval. Yes, that's right. All of you. Especially you. I pointed to the one who called me a Midgerin maker. I do not consent to be poked or prodded ever again by any of you. If you need one or others, you go to them. Elsewhere. I pointed in the direction of the guarded doorway. Zett smiled at me, amused by the audacity I dared display. 2. Give me back my coin pouch, the one I held the Breens in. That young human family I was protecting. My satchel is of no use to you. There are many things in there. My things. A collection of things that are very important to me. There are many things within it that I require. Things that I need. All of that within is my property, and I want it returned. Zett's subtle smile was then lost. That request did not seem to meet his acceptance, yet I continued. My last appeal was entreated to the sovereign far more sweetly. I stood up. 3rd, I stepped closer so I could nearly whisper my request directly to him. Send that human family away safely. Back to the Myr'Det. Please, don't keep them here. They are humans. Their lives, they are so fleeting. They will grow old and die here so quickly. I'll need Nuna to remain here with me, to attend to me, as my personal physician and my guardian. If you can make that happen, then yes, I will give myself to you.
What makes you think you can bargain with Zett? I am the sovereign. Your life is in my hands,
he said coldly. Well, if that is not your interest, I apologize. His look of disappointment spoke otherwise. I then beg of you, Sovereign, please, send me with the human family back to the Myr'Det. That human family I brought with me here secretly was my caregiving designate for my time of mating. They are innocent, and they have no knowledge of this place, or even why we are all here. Allow them to accompany me home safely. Please. I expected this time was coming soon, but I never expected what transpired at Tel Suma, or this chance encounter we now defined between us. Zett's handlers then attempted to create more space between us. They looked upon me with intense contempt and disgust. How dare I make demands of the sovereign? They figured once again that this was the end for me. Yet, once again, Zett's growing intrigue spared my life. He had never experienced anyone like me before. Not only was I merely a partial elf, but I was a scamp, a rogue of questionable origin. I was street trash from the western lands. Though I was a woman, capable of defending myself and tricking his well-trained male handlers with powerful, unknown magic. I was also his only living connection to my father, and thereby the sole historical thread to his only lost son. He did not want to give that up. No, he was not done with me yet.
Seeing as you can walk, I'd like to invite you both to my throne room. We're about to welcome some visitors. I'd like very much for you both to attend.
He then turned and started walking away from Nuna and I with his angry posse in tow. I was still naked, covered only with the white silken sheet I was sleeping in. He didn't seem to care, so I followed him as I was, as did Nuna. As we approached the archway to the throne room, trailing behind the sovereign's entourage, his guards stepped between Nuna and I and prevented us from entering.
Where do you think you're going?
One of the gray armored guards asked of me.
We are the invited guests of the sovereign,
Nuna responded.
I wasn't talking to you, priestess. This one, she cannot enter the sovereign's throne room in a bedsheet.
The guard demanded.
Tamlin, Burdock, allow her in. I want her here, beside me.
The sovereign had doubled back to fetch me as he noticed I was no longer following him. He waved for me to follow, so I did. The confused guard stepped aside and allowed me to pass them. The sight of my large naked ass consumed their stunned eyes. We were then seated beside the sovereign's throne. There were 2 seats beside his, one to each side. One was for his deceased wife and queen, and the other for his son, who was also dead. Zett welcomed for Nuna and I to each take one of the seats beside him. His throne rests on a dais atop a balcony level high above the main hall. The hall was lined with armored gray guards. They held their shields and spears in perfect alignment. After he had been informed they were ready, Zett nodded for the other guests to be invited in. I was shocked to see it was Philistre, the Drow priestess, and the new matriarch of what was the House of Zestiri. Accompanying her were 2 younger Drow elves. Like me, they were also barely clothed. Their names were Rumdrel and Shiella. Philistre approached the sovereign's balcony, bowed before him, and then looked up to him as she spoke.
Great sovereign, thank you for seeing me. You are as great and merciful as your legend tells,
she said, using her most seductive voice.
Why are they here? Why would you allow the Drow into the Myr'Det?
Nuna was incensed. Zett waved at her to be silent. I agree with Nuna. Nothing good can come of allowing the Dark Elves among you, Sovereign. This one, she is a master of deceit and a bringer of only malice, I warned. Behind the Sovereign waited 2 of his captains, Trumaine and Balandir. They were the Greys that would later come to be known by the humans out west as the Two. It was they who had led their squads of wizard warriors into the darkness of the Doiki, where they used their time-shifting magic to wreak havoc upon the Underdark. They slaughtered many houses of the Drow, Most of the houses were deprived of nearly all but their matriarchs. Just as Nuna had been, they were reduced to being the high priestesses of few to none. After dealing this blow, the matriarchs would naturally turn on each other to consolidate power and save themselves. This made the Grey's mission even more efficient and effective. The Sovereign and the actions of his shadow army were not just a blatant display of his awesome power. They were also a clear demonstration of his military leadership. Philistre was the last matriarch left standing. She had come to beg for mercy of the Sovereign, just as he had expected.
Why? Why would you think you could attack the overworld without any consequence?
Zett asked.
It was not I that began this war, Sovereign,
she answered.
Yet it is you that is here attempting to stop it. What makes you think that I should have any mercy on any of you? After what you've done to our woodland cousins in the Myr'Det, how could you think that I would allow that to go unpunished?
That latest attack was purely an act of retribution, Sovereign. The wood elves of the Myr'Det led a mission to kill my great mistress, Kaylee Zestiri. Our house barely survived that attack. Clearly you were aware of this as well, great Sovereign.
Philistre then motioned to the two younger dark elves behind her. They unfurled a covering about a sword and handed it to her. She then raised it up high, presenting it to Zett.
Behold, this tout I bear was found among the attackers. The grey assassin that took my mistress' life used this sword. Is it not one of yours?
She accused. The tout she showed him was Theb's broadsword. She was accusing Zett of starting the war by attacking their outpost at Zytefetin. Zett could not know that she was lying to him, but I certainly did.
She lies,
I yelled down to her. My throated cry filled the hall. I then got up out of the throne beside Zett, scampered down the stairs in my bedsheet, and headed right at Philistre. I snatched the sword from her hands demonstratively. The gray armored guards closed in, unsure of what I might do next. I then turned back up to the Sovereign and told him the truth.
It was me. I killed Kaylee Zestiri. Thebkaru was only there because I insisted upon it. And he was sworn to my defense,
I yelled.
You are the Red Rogue. The one Kaylee spoke of. It was you.
Philistre hissed at me.
You and that beautiful human warrior. The one called Dan Tunuville. I knew he was planted among us.
Yes, it was me. With my inhibitions nearly non-existent, I was no longer afraid of them. I then did something Theb would never have approved of. I announced who I was.
I am Aermine, the daughter of Pule. I came for my vengeance upon you for killing my father and attempting to prevent my creation. It was you, the Drow, who incited the giants to attack the humans of the West. For that, you all got exactly what you deserved. Now you know. This sword is mine.
I sneered back at her. She looked fearful that I was poised to bring Theb's tout down upon her neck, so she cowered a bit before me. I enjoyed that feeling of power immensely. I then turned my back to her and allowed her a view of my big ass as I headed back up the stairs with Theb's sword. I then returned to Zett's side, pretending, for now, to be his anointed new queen.
You must kill her, Sovereign. She has seen this place. She must die,
I demanded. As those words left my lips, I realized that is precisely what Theb told me when I first captured Dan. Despite all that happened thereafter, he was right. It did indeed bring about the fall of our guild.
Must I?
He asked dismissively. Yet before he could oblige me and order her death, Philistre spoke again, offering Zett 2 gifts.
Please accept these 2 servants as my gift to you, great sovereign. They appear as I do, but they are not Drow. They are children of the overworld. They giggle and smile always. They are insufferably happy. I offer them to you to bring you joy, and to spare what remains of my flock of their infectious goodness.
She then motioned to the 2 young Drow.
You are now the property of the sovereign Zett. He is the one and only sovereign of all the elves, on either side of the ground.
She flattered Zett. I could see through this guise.
Do not accept these gifts, sovereign. These happy Drow are being planted here, to be used as informants until Philistre finds a pathway for her own revenge. My friend, Dan, told me much of her. She was Kaylee Zastiri's adjutant, I warned.
Of course they are.
He said softly to me with a wry smile. He then looked down to Philistre and spoke his final commands.
Now that you know your place, you must return there and stay there. Do not incite me again,
he warned.
Thank you. Thank you, merciful sovereign.
Philistre said, bowing repeatedly as she was escorted away, back into the depths of the Underdark. After she was gone, I appealed to Zett again. It was a mistake to allow her to leave, to survive. I warned him again. She will be back.
Oh, I know,
he said calmly.
Thebkaru has trained you well. I have never known of an elf with a keener sense of danger, or a finer detector of deceit. He was the last and greatest of all of my eunuchs.
Your eunuchs? I asked.
Thanks so much for watching, everyone. If you haven't yet, please subscribe and ring the bell for notifications so you never miss an episode. Be sure to smash that like button and comment below. It helps a lot. If you'd like to help me get this book published, please consider becoming a Patreon supporter. And as always, be sure to share this story with all of your friends on your favorite social media.